Hey everyone, my name's Ashrita,
And my name's Kieran.
and welcome back to the Open Book Podcast, Chapter 2.
So today with us, we have The Great Gatsby. And so we'll be reviewing how well its movie adaptations stayed true to the book and its themes. So we have reviewed for you the 1949 version of Great Gatsby and the 2000 version of The Great Gatsby. So we can start with the 1949.
Yeah, but before we actually go into the real movies, I think we should give our audience a little brief description about what is The Great Gatsby. So, basically in The Great Gatsby, there's this dude named Gatsby, obviously, and at the beginning of the book, he's pretty broke, but he falls in love with this girl named Daisy, but she's like really rich and pretty. So he's like, "Oh, please wait for me. I'll come back rich and we'll be together then." But the thing is, she doesn't wait, and
Well, she
like
did wait, but then he was gone for too long.
he was gone for too long,
And then this guy Tom comes in.
and he's like, "Yeah, I want to marry you." So they got married because he's like also super rich. Um, and so after that, Gatsby comes back and he's like, "Okay, so like, where are you, Daisy?" And
She's married.
but that doesn't stop Gatsby, and Gatsby and Daisy end up getting together.
They have an affair.
They have an affair. Um, so I guess a win is a win for Gatsby, but yeah,
There
that's
was a
pretty much
whole
it.
lot of drama about that, but you can read the book to find out about that.
Yeah, there was a whole lot of drama and like tea behind it, but in the end, Gatsby dies.
So a
So
lot of drama.
yeah, a lot of drama, but like he dies. So, anyways, we're gonna go into the 1949 version now and really go into how was it really. So
So I think that the movie, for the characters, it tried to make it more criminal, and they made Gatsby more of a criminal, and he was solemn and gloomy rather than like the charismatic man that he was in the book. And it went a lot into his past and his military time, but not really into his relationships with Daisy. Like they didn't it wasn't very clearly conveyed why he was so attached to her, and what she represented basically.
I would say in how like even though the 1949 movie was film adaptation was a film noir, I would say my issue with it was it focused so much on trying to be a film noir that it really lost like the real message in our opinion about like what the whole book's about. Like for example, they they really lost like the message about how the American dream is no longer achievable. They really went out of order with all of like the events which occurred in the Great Gatsby novel, that it really was not that easy to like comprehend. Everything felt out of place, and the message didn't really stick to me at the end of the novel. I will say though, one of the great benefits that I saw from the film noir is that you can tell that they were very intentional with like the the
Stylization.
stylization. Yeah, they use like the cool dark undertones to really emphasize that solemn and like sadness behind Gatsby's character. So in that um in that idea, they lost the mysteriousness behind Gatsby. I mean, in the beginning for both movies, they literally said, "Oh yeah, he died." So there's just like no
Mystery about it.
mystery that I think we all enjoyed from Gatsby.
Like you could say, in the 1949 movie, they started at his funeral rather than hinting towards his death like they did in the book. And so I think it kind of lost a sort of nuance because you don't find out, well, obviously you still have to find out how he died, but it also wasn't very clear why he died, because in the 1949 movie we all know that Myrtle died, and Gatsby took the blame for it. Um, and Wilson finds out that the car that killed her, Wilson, who is Myrtle's husband, finds the car and traces it back to Tom, who then blames Gatsby for it. But we didn't understand anything of who Myrtle was and her significance to Wilson or Tom because she was just completely like written out of the script.
And with that criticism and a few compliments, I think we should move on to the 2001 film adaptation. Kieran, you want to take it away?
Yeah. So the 2001 film started, it was more accurate, I'd say, to the chronological events of The Great Gatsby. It, like, every event happened in the order that it happened in the book, aside from a few scenes that they added in and a few scenes that they moved around just to add suspense. But I'd say it stayed more true to the meaning of the book and the themes of the book, and the dialogue itself was like directly from the book. Like they used word for word from the book. Um a few differences that I'd like to know were like that they added a lot more history to Daisy and Gatsby's story. Like she made up the name Jay Gatsby. And so I think that plays a lot into like his character. And I really like that.
I will also say one thing that I noticed or we noticed in the 2000 film adaptation is that there was a like I know you were speaking historically there they had Daisy and Gatsby pretty accurate, but I would say for like history in general, it was the aesthetic of the whole movie arguably was kind of modern in a way. It didn't have that like 1920s like jazz and eccentricity that was happening back then. I would argue that one thing the 1949 version does pretty well is really capture like the essence of the 20s, um, and their out like from the outfits to the music to the dialogue. I
And
mean,
the
and
dramatization
the
of it, it was
dramatization.
super like well
It
done.
was super well done. So today we're going to be analyzing The Great Gatsby, and we're on a new day, obviously.
Yeah.
But we will be taking a break from our movie review and instead going deep diving into how each movie displays our main message, the American dream, and how it's conveyed in The Great Gatsby. Today we selected 10 quotes for you guys to listen to, and
That we feel that communicates
communicate
the
the message the
best.
best. So for the first,
Our message was that the American dream is no longer achievable as it was built on the ideas that everyone can achieve the growth that they desire, and now gaps in social classes are too wide to move up. So,
one of the first quotes that we chose, which we thought conveyed this message the best, was from page 69. It says, "I wouldn't ask too much of her, I ventured. You can't repeat the past." Gatsby cries, "Can't repeat the past? Why, of course you can." So I think Gatsby's belief that he can recreate the past really mirrors like the American dream in its on like its realities of the American dream, how you think that you can shape what you think you can make. Oh God, that was horrible. Wait, the American dream that you can make whatever you want if you have, you can get whatever you want if you have enough wealth and
or like if you put enough work into it, but that's not realistic anymore because like you just need money and there's no way to get money without working, and that's not a very like, I think it's the pay from normal work is too low to get to the wealth that most people aspire to get to. So as in terms of like how each movie expressed this, I think that the 2000 movie did a lot better because they directly quote this, and they firmly attach Gatsby to his past and his memories with Daisy, with like the use of the cufflinks as symbolism. While the 1949 version, I don't think he didn't feel like he was actually like trying to like get back to the past. It was more like he wanted to just get wealthier and be seen as wealthy with Daisy as like a
That's a good
point for
point.
status.
Yeah, and some like in the like 1949 movie, I feel like Gatsby, he like although the movie does like a really great job of like showing the luxuriousness and the um the like luxury and of the wealth that everyone has, they show really like the emotional the lack of emotion like between like characters relationships, I feel like, and it really just highlights like the differences in wealth and its impact. So I think we can move on to the next quote.
What we have from page 22, he stretched out his arms toward the dark water in a curious way, and, far as I was from him, I distinguished nothing except a single green light, minute and far away, that might have been at the end of a dock. When I looked once more for Gatsby, he had vanished, and I was alone again in the unquiet darkness.
So I would say that the green light really symbolizes Gatsby's dream and desires, like of getting Daisy, getting a bunch of being very wealthy, and obviously being very successful. Being very successful, yet it really remains distant and unattainable to the point where even if he's reaching out his arms so desperately, he can't grasp onto it. And this really mirrors how the American dream clutches on to like, it really makes people think like everything can be attainable,
but it's so far out of
reach, and it's just like a false promise that the American dream like kind of cultivates that hard work guarantees success. And obviously in the Great Gatsby, I mean, Gatsby was working hard for Daisy obviously, but that didn't work out well. So
yeah, as for the adaptations, the 1949 movie, I don't feel fully communicated this longing for another life. He just pursued a goal, but there was no longing for it. It was just like he just worked and sort of got it. But there was no part of it that showed his longing, aside from like when he was just freshly out of war and he saw the Buchanan's wedding in the newspaper, and he was like, he just felt despondent because he had lost Daisy, but there was still like no showing of his longing. 2000, I think, really did well in communicating how like Gatsby built up his life to get to a point where Daisy would be able to go with like and live with him and like get married to him, because they showed his progression through wealth with the in the flashbacks. Like it started with him like walking on the side of the road and then moving into a party, and then from there it goes into the present with like his mansion.
So our next quote is from page 26, and it states, "She came in with such a propriety haste and looked around so possessively at the furniture that I wondered if she lived here." And this is referencing Catherine from The Great Gatsby. So this quote, I'm just gonna give like a little brief on it. So Catherine's obsession with wealth and status really reflected the materialistic aspect of the American dream. She really thought the money would help elevate her in some way, but obviously it didn't work out.
As for interpretations, in the 1949 movie, I don't think Catherine was mentioned at all. She did not have any she didn't have like an appearance like she did in the book or in the 2000s movie. And well, they completely cut out the chapter 2 party at Myrtle and Tom's apartment, so they couldn't really communicate that like desperation for the American dream. In the 2000s movie, Nick had a full conversation with Catherine, and they were just talking about how Myrtle and Tom couldn't get together because Daisy was preventing it. which was untrue. But Catherine, like, they didn't really express her longing to climb the metaphorical ladder that is like climbing, like, what's the word?
The social
Like going up the
social
social
class system. Yeah. With that, I'm gonna move on to our next quote. So it's from page 28, and it states, "I married him because I thought he was a gentleman," she said finally. "I thought he knew something about breeding, but he wasn't fit to lick my shoe." So this quote goes into Myrtle's disillusionment with her marriage and how it highlights how the social class really remains rigid in a sense, despite the American dream's promise of upward mobility.
Like, even though he appeared to be rich, he wasn't actually, and so she is like expressing her distaste for that like pretense, and like really, like, it shows how deep the longing to like move up social classes was in that time. So for the 1949 movie, Myrtle, like, she expresses her distaste with being with George, but she doesn't really, it's like it's only shown because of how she's like so desperate to run away to Tom, and it's not really like ever shown in a like direct way.
And also, I will say, we didn't see much of Myrtle in the 1949 version. We honestly, like, how it worked was she would complain to George about being locked up, while she like wants to go hang out with Tom, you know, and dress up extravagantly, and then she gets hit by a car. So
Those were her only appearances in the 1949 movie.
Yeah,
so it was
so-
hard to convey anything about Myrtle or
And
the desperate longing for the American dream aside from through Gatsby. I think in the 2000s movie, Myrtle's was like in the movie, but she kind of didn't express how she wanted to move up. She just sort of reminisced about how she and Tom got together, and then it cut right to their fight where he smacked her in the face. But yeah, her only, like, it didn't seem as though she wanted to move up classes, and that was what was driving her to be with Tom. But she just wanted to be with, she, like, in the movie, it was only like communicated that she wanted to be with Tom rather than moving up. And then we can move on to the next quote. So this is from page 46. "Anything can happen now that we've slid over this bridge, I thought. Anything at all. Even Gatsby could happen without any particular wonder."
So I would say, like, this excerpt really reflects like how the idea of how America is just this awesome land full of opportunity and possibility. So Gatsby, obviously, we learn around chapter 6 how he rose from poverty to wealth, and this really embodies the American dream, like the idealistic like situation of the American dream. But it never but the novel still questions whether success is truly attainable, because for him success meant getting Daisy, like ending up with Daisy, as well as being rich. So,
just because of the status that she provided and the meaning around her, because he said before she sounded like money, her voice was like money. So Daisy, I think, in this situation represents money, and so getting Daisy was getting that wealth.
And also, when Daisy was with him, like touring his house, for example, he sounded so insecure of his wealth status, and he wasn't sure if am I wealthy enough. So all of this like self like deprecation and insecurity really highlights like, are you successful if you're still not sure about attaining wealth? So
I think a lot of success comes from like confidence in your success.
And I will say, as for the movies, I think the 1949 version doesn't really highlight like, I mean, it goes a lot into Gatsby's past, such as like his military background and how he like rose from poverty to wealth. I will like give credits to the movie for that.
I think they
However,
did that a lot better than 2000s, but you know.
but when it came to the scene where he was supposed to show his like insecurity with wealth, such as in the novel, the movie he kind of just showed like he was bragging about everything in a sense. He wasn't
Yeah.
really like he was only doing the bragging part. He wasn't really going like,
Well,
oh,
I
is
think
this enough? If that makes sense.
yeah, it was kind of like the bragging is to show off that he is successful because he doesn't feel that way, but it didn't really show that in his like expressions. It like he just looked arrogant. In the 2000s movie though, I think it also didn't really communicate this well, cuz like Gatsby Could Happen is like the happening of the American dream, like that success, but I don't think that it was really communicated that that was his goal rather than like Daisy being the goal, because Daisy was part of the goal, like part of his goals. It's like, but the success was like the real driving factor. So I don't think either of them did that better than the other.
So we're gonna move on to our next quote. It's from page 41. At the enchanted metropolitan twilight, I felt a haunting loneliness sometimes and felt it in others. Poor young clerks who loitered in front of windows waiting until it was time for a solitary restaurant dinner. Young clerks in the dusk waiting with the most poignant moments of night and life. So I would say this quote really highlights the emptiness between the pursuit of success. The American dream, while it is a promising opportunity, it often left individuals feeling isolated and unfulfilled. Like this idea of fulfillment is something which is commonly overlooked. I feel like when we're thinking about being successful, like a real world situation, which we can like this idea is like trying to obtain like a certain like grade, for example, in high school, and trying so hard to get that grade, but you don't feel successful in the end because you feel like you didn't learn anything, you didn't do as well as you needed to.
Yeah.
So I think like this book really shows like this message from this quote is really conveyed through Gatsby's insecurity again. It's obvious that the Jay Gats in him is starting to peak out, and he's feeling like he's not as fulfilled as he should be.
Yeah. I think this was a lot, like this quote really surrounds like everyone rather than like
Specifically
just
Gatsby.
or anyone else. And so I think that there were no scenes in either movie that really communicated how this drive was everyone's, rather than just like the few notable people that were mentioned. And so neither movie really showed like people outside of the main characters, which I understand because paying actors is odd. Except, yeah, there are only people that were actually like mentioned that weren't out of the main characters were like Owl Eyes and the two girls that Jordan was talking to, and neither of them really conveyed that drive for success.
Yeah. Should we move on? So our next quote is from page 44. It states, he was balancing himself on the dashboard of his car with that resourcefulness of movement that is so peculiarly American, that comes, I suppose, with the absence of lifting work or rigid sitting in youth, and even more with the formless grace of our nervous sporadic games. So this quote really emphasizes like the energy and optimism behind the American dream, but it also like hints at its superficiality, as wealth and privilege often come without real effort. I know that many times when we consider wealth, like especially in The Great Gatsby, like these people who come from old money, like have old money, they inherit this wealth and power.
And there's such a like relaxed nature about them. Like money is nothing, and they use it as they breathe.
And their influence on people, and honestly, they help influence a lot of the American dream and its unattainability, in it, like its unrealisticness, in a way, because not everyone can inherit wealth and power. Obviously, that is like the top 1% issue. However, many people, we look at that top 1% and we're like, I want to become them, but it's really unattainable because our situations are completely different. And that's why many times the people who wish for the American dream don't really succeed in the end. For example, Gatsby, who came from poverty and looked at people of high social class and still didn't feel successful at the end.
Yeah. For the movie adaptation of this quote, there wasn't really like, I think in the 2000s movie, Gatsby had this like forced, relaxed nature in spending his money, but you could tell that he like continued to try and keep getting money because he didn't have enough to maintain that lifestyle forever. Like you could see he kept working, he kept getting calls about like who like his contacts in his businesses, and like there was such a like there wasn't this relaxed, balanced, resourceful nature that was in the 2000 movie. The 1949 movie didn't show his absence of lifting work. Like he looked like the way he carried himself, he had definitely worked throughout his life, and he did. But that was not like the essence of Gatsby that was conveyed in the book. So our next quote, we forgot to get the page number 4, but Dr. Eckelberg's eyes, dimmed by a little by many paintless days under the sun and rain, brood over the solemn dumping ground.
So this quote goes into the how the symbolism behind the eyes of Eckelberg. So the faded eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, they symbolize the moral decay and emptiness of the American dream, especially as it is tied to materialism and corruption. It really shows like by this the imagery of the dimmed paintless days under sun and rain, the solemn dumping ground. That really shows like that tone in the dialogue. It's very melancholic in a way, which I think both, well, especially the 1949 version, you do kind of feel melancholic in a way.
The way the movie was styled, it was very melancholy, very solemn, very gloomy, but there wasn't very much significance about Dr. Eckelberg's eyes. It was only mentioned, like, seen maybe once in the beginning and then once in the end in like a very short time.
And also I feel like we although one of the main points of The Great Gatsby's 1949 version, like the main goal of it was to highlight the corruption and criminal the criminal aspect of
the
Gatsby.
1920s.
Yeah, of the 1920s. And so it didn't like go into moral decay because the whole point was to
highlight how it was
evil
just...
it was, yeah. And so because of that, we didn't really see any buildup of moral decay.
I think in the 2000 movie, they put a lot more emphasis on Dr. Eckelberg's eyes. They often, while Tom or Nick or Gatsby were driving through the Valley of Ashes, they would linger on the eyes and keep it there to show the difference in between like the West and East Egg versus like New York. And so I think, and the Valley of Ashes, it really symbolized like how there was such a difference and such like a... And then also the eyes watched the decay in morals over time. Like, it first started out watching Myrtle and Tom's affair, and then later on it watched Myrtle's death and Gatsby taking the blame, and Daisy's sort of unremorse about like leaving the blame to Gatsby.
So should we move on? So for this quote, in the next quote, we don't have page numbers. However, our quote is, "Why they came east, I don't know. I had no sight into Daisy's heart, but I felt that Tom would drift on forever, seeking a little wistfully for the dramatic turbulence of some irrecoverable football game." So this quote really goes into Tom's longing for the past, which suggests that even though like you think that he has everything he wants, like side mistresses and wealth, who have and they had supposedly achieved the American dream, they really are still dissatisfied and unable to truly find fulfillment. Like, even though they're in this utopia of wealth and they think that they have everything they've ever wanted, there's always like something that they want more,
and it's always missing,
and it's always
unachievable, which is sort of communicates the theme that the American dream, or like success and fulfillment, is unachievable.
So in terms of movie, I would say that in the 1949 version, I don't really see much which goes into how the longingness of of fulfillment, like of success. We do see success, but we don't see like the fulfillment behind everything. It's merely just people being wealthy and going through like a certain event.
Also, the wealth did not, you could see really clearly in the book that wealth did not guarantee happiness, because all the wealthy people were ending up going to Gatsby's parties and getting drunk and like not enjoying their wealth. They sort of just like partied the day away because they had the time and ability to do so, but there was no fulfillment that came from doing so. And then 2000s movie, also, it did not really communicate that like wistfulness and that longing for more. I think, it didn't really, so we'll move on to our last quote.
And final quote, which we think helps convey the American dream. It says, "We drew in deep breaths as we walked back through the cold vestibules, unutterably aware of our identity with this country for one straight hour before we melted indistinguishably into it again." So this moment suggests a fleeting connection to the idea of the American dream, where individuals feel part of a greater purpose, yet it ultimately fades, showing the dream's transience. So I think like the aspect of walking through the cold, unaware of our identity in the country, it really shows that it makes us question like, okay, what is our purpose? We have all this money, but like, what are we doing? So I think like one thing that can be talked about during this is that after we truly reach like the ideal amount of wealth, is that when we start thinking about like our emotions and like how we connect with others, if that makes sense. For example, Gatsby, after like obviously he did get to Daisy before he became rich in a sense, like how it is described in 1949 movie, except like after he did come back rich and he was trying to get to Daisy, after like he was still like wondering about like, okay, so like why, like he was thinking like, okay, why am I not feeling like I have everything in the world right now?
So he kept working and working, as shown in the 2000 movie. And also I think it really like his progression into like his insecurity about his character Jay Gatsby really also communicated this detachment from like the American identity and like knowing who you are as like a person in this country.
And so with that, those explanations, you want to give them our movie recommendation? Which movie we can recommend?
I think that the 2000s
Thousands
movie communicated the themes of The Great Gatsby and like their characters a lot better than the 1949 movie did. And so with that,
we're gonna close the chapter. Thank you for watching our episode 2 of the Open Book Podcast. See you next time.
See you next time.